Okay, so this is shocking. What were the reasons that Nehru gave for not allowing them to visit the site?
The reasons are all very specious, to say the least. They're the kind of reasons a schoolboy would give for not wanting to go to school. So some of the reasons are similar. Nehru says that, the committee cannot go to Taiwan because we don't have diplomatic relations with Taiwan. Well, you could make a try. Says, no, the committee should not go to Taiwan because probably the buildings and the hospital where Netaji was taken, they don't exist anymore. How does Nehru know? The committee should not go to Taiwan because probably the aerodrome has been destroyed. Why would the Taiwanese destroy an aerodrome? I mean, when the British left India, all the buildings were kept reserved. The Indians didn't start going around destroying the buildings. So, to assume that those buildings were destroyed or damaged, I mean, that is just nonsense. It was clearly that there was an angle because Nehru was worried that if the committee actually went to Taiwan, it would be impossible to hide the fact that there was no crash.
So, were any possessions of Netaji recovered from the crash?
Good question, because since Netaji's face was not photographed because his face was apparently so badly damaged, according to Habibur Rahman, there was no photographic evidence of that kind, but surely they would produce some of his known possessions. Here the thing is, they produced a rectangular watch which was said to belong to Netaji, but nobody ever knew that Netaji possessed a rectangular watch. The watch he was very fond of was round. His mother had given it to him and Netaji was especially attached to it, but that round watch was never found. Why? Because possibly Netaji was so attached to the round watch that he thought he didn't want to leave it at the site of the crash. But they should have been inventive enough to find a duplicate or a round watch that resembled the one which Netaji was known to use. But they don't do that. So they produced a rectangular watch and nobody ever knew that Netaji wore that rectangular watch. In fact, sometime during the course of the testimony, there's a witness who comes and says he never knew that Netaji wore a rectangular watch. Then another witness is coming and the chairman stops him for deposing on the watch. He says, that's already been discussed. And then it's only the other committee members who say that, Mr. Chairman, you don't know how a committee is supposed to function. Just because one witness has said something, it doesn't mean you stop the other witnesses from deposing on the same subject. So then the witness is allowed to make a statement. But this also shows that, the chairman was poorly qualified. He was to supervise such an important committee whose findings would have national significance, maybe even international significance.
So, were there any contradictions between the oral testimony and the documents written?
Lots of contradictions, my dear. For example, Habibur Rahman, Colonel Habibur Rahman, who was the star witness, when he was asked what kind of place did the crash take place, he said it was all flat country all around, describing the topography of the general area where the crash took place. But the photographs that were submitted, that showed hills all around. So nobody can miss hills all around. Nobody can mistake a hilly area for flat country. But Habibur Rahman's testimony is very clear and crisp. It was flat country all around. But the photographs, they show hills all around. So whom to believe? Whom to trust? These are just a sample of the numerous contradictions which were there. I mean, aside from this, Habibur Rahman changes his testimony. He says the crash took place when the aircraft had ascended 100 feet. And then later he says, no, the crash took place when it ascended 1,000 feet. So some witnesses are saying 100 feet, some are saying 1,000 feet. When an aircraft is going to crash, from 100 feet, the people can survive. But if from 1,000 feet, if it is just, falling flat on the ground, it's going to be a terrible crash. I actually went for some aircraft simulation exercises just in the process of writing this book to get an idea of what flying an aircraft looks like. And the whole thing is full of contradictions. Then, as I mentioned previously, some people are saying the aircraft landed on its left side and the left wing was broken. Some people are saying, some of the people who deposed as witnesses, that no, it crashed on the right side and the right side wing was broken. So why did Netaji's clothes catch fire? The witness is saying, oh, because he was sitting next to where the oil was there in the aircraft. But when the aircraft is described, when photographs of the bomber which flew on these occasions is seen, we see that actually the only people who are sitting on proper seats are the pilot and the co-pilot. The rest of the people in those bombers, they were just sitting on the floor. So your positions were not held by some kind of seat belt. So to say that Netaji was next to the oil tank, it didn't make any sense. The plane is supposed to be crashing. People are going to be pushed here and there. So it's not like a stationary position. But the witness, when he's giving the testimony, he's sort of assuming that these were stationary positions. So lots of contradictions and lots of very suspicious factors. Even the appointment of the chairman as the head of the committee was suspicious, considering that you had such a qualified, eminent jurist. The rationalizations given by Pandit Nehru were not very convincing. The ban on the committee going to Taiwan, that was very suspicious. The fact that hundreds and hundreds of documents were not produced before the committee, which we know the government was in possession of, these were also things which were very surprising. And what we can say is that Suresh Basu's report was therefore completely convincing. He has a falling out with the chairman. The chairman is very insulting. Suresh Basu, at one point, he's so disgusted with how the proceedings are going. He says, I'm not going to be in Delhi, I'm going to work from Calcutta. Can you send me photocopies of the documents? And the chairman says, no, you are supposed to be here. He's like a military officer saying, why did you leave the inquiry? Why did you go to Calcutta? We are not going to send you any documents. Then Suresh Basu writes to the Prime Minister and he says, can I please have the documents so I can write my dissenting report? And the Prime Minister says, no, if you want to look at those documents, you have to come to Delhi. There is nothing so top secret about those documents. Why is the government holding on to these documents? Why can't they treat a member of the committee with dignity? Said the postal service was active. They could just have sent the documents to Suresh Basu. And the worst thing is that Nehru decides to publish the majority report, and he writes to Suresh Basu that, okay, you have given a dissenting opinion. We don't take note of it. The government will not publish it. So Suresh Basu has to publish his report, which is called the dissentient report, at his own cost. So the whole thing is completely cooked up. But we are now in the age of fake news. I'd just like to say that fake news was not invented today. It was not invented 5 years ago. Fake news was flourishing at that time when this committee was holding an inquiry. This was all fake news. What is surprising also is that the lack of intellectual questioning. You have British historians, you have American historians who actually support the majority verdict. Why? Well, it looks like they want to support Nehru. They want to support the death of Subhash Bose. And you have a historian, for example, like Leonard Gordon, who writes that, the dissentient report was rubbish. Whereas actually the truth of the matter is, if you go through the report with the unbiased eye, you will find that the majority report is completely cooked up. It's all cock and bull. The dissentient report written by Suresh Basu is clear, crisp. It's very clear there was no crash. There could not have been any death.
So in the last episode, we talked about the Rani of Jhansi regiment. And you told us that they were not given the respect that they so well deserved. So why do you think it was that? Why do you think that their photos were not put up in the walls of the parliament?
Good question, Ananya. But as I mentioned in the previous episode, Subhash Bose's portrait was himself not put in the central halls of parliament for more than a decade by Pandit Nehru. And as I mentioned previously, this could not have been oversight. It was deliberate. Now, of course, if they don't put Bose's portrait, and it looks very strange if they put the Rani of Jhansi regiment's portraits. So then there was a complete bypass of the Rani of Jhansi regiment as well as of other members of the INA. None of them were permitted to have their photographs in the central hall of parliament. That's a shameful thing. And this happened for years on end, and I think it was more than a decade had passed when somebody, an outraged member of parliament from West Bengal, he raised the issue, and then finally we had Bose's portrait put in the hall of parliament. I should mention actually that the Rani of Jhansi regiment, it deserves special respect. It deserves special respect just like the real Rani of Jhansi deserves special respect. Why? Because I believe that the kind of courage they displayed was special, not only because they were women, but because of the way they were recruited.
So, why do you think that the Rani of Jhansi regiment deserved more respect than the other regiments?
That's a very, very important question, and I think I'll give a little bit of philosophy when I answer that question, because there is courage and there is courage. And we need to respect all forms of courage, but certain forms of courage deserve our highest respect. For example, you have a criminal, a thug, a robber, who also might show some courage. But do we respect the robber? Do we respect the thief for the courage that he displays? We don't. Maybe a little grudging respect, but not too much. Then apart from that, you have mercenaries. For example, I work in Afghanistan. You have so many mercenaries who are fighting with different warlords. They have allegiance to a certain ethnic group and they fight for them, and they show a certain kind of courage. Do we respect that? No, not really, because they are actually just fighting because they are being paid. They are not fighting for a cause. They are not fighting for a high cause. So they are deserving of our respect, but not of great respect. Now, for example, there were Indians who fought for the British Army, and they fought in India and they fought in other countries. Gandhi himself fought for the British Army. So when Gandhi fought for the British Army to quash the Zulu rebellion in Africa, was he deserving of great respect? No. He was deserving of some respect, certainly, because he displayed some courage, but we could not give him great respect. He was fighting for a foreign force, for an agenda which was not important to India. To quash the Zulu rebellion, why was it important? So, but Gandhi fought for the British Army. We don't give him respect for that. He was Sergeant Major Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, serving with the British Army. We don't give him respect for that. We give him respect for what he did in getting our freedom. Now, in getting our freedom, the people who fought against the British, I would say that certain kinds of recruits deserved greater respect. When the Indians who fought for the British against the Rani of Jhansi, the historical Rani of Jhansi, they don't deserve our respect. Why? Because they were more or less like mercenaries. They were fighting against an indigenous Rani. The Rani is the one who deserves our respect. Now, when the British Indian Army fought with the Indian Army which was fighting on behalf of the Japanese, when they had their conflict in Burma, then we have to respect those who were fighting against the British more. The Rani of Jhansi regiment, they were deserving of special respect because their motives were the purest, the highest. They were not mercenaries. They were fighting for the cause of Indian independence. So within the INA also, there were some people who were originally with the British Indian Army. Then there were Japanese prisoners of war. They were convinced by Netaji, well, you have been fighting for the wrong army. You have been fighting for the British, who never guaranteed you independence. Fight for the Japanese against the British for Indian independence. And they were convinced. So the chairman, Shah Nawaz Khan, he was like that. But you could say the prisoners of war held in Japan, their motives were pure, but the motives of the Rani of Jhansi regiment were still purer. I mean, they were daughters of families living in Southeast Asia, families who said, daughter, go and fight for Indian independence. They had no agenda. They were not mercenaries. They were not being paid by anyone. The ones who were prisoners of war, they, at least you could say, they were told that, okay, you'll stop being a prisoner, you'll fight for Indian independence. They were also great fighters. In fact, I think it was the battle which In Burma, the battles, even though the INA was defeated, they had a political victory of a kind. Because the British Indian Army, face to face with the Rani of Jhansi regiment, they would have thought, my God, who am I fighting? Am I fighting my sisters? Who am I fighting for? For the British. What kind of courage is this? I mean, it would have been shame. If I had been in the British Indian Army fighting against the Rani of Jhansi regiment, I would have absolutely refused to fight. Impossible. So their courage was of the highest quality. It deserves the highest respect. It deserves a full wall in Parliament, and even a wall is not enough.